Hey, everybody. So, after we just get off of this wonderful Book of Boba Fett trailer that we love so much, now it looks like as soon as a week from tonight, that's right, next Friday, November 12th at Disney Plus Day, we might get the Obi Wan trailer. So, of course, we have to talk about it right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So now it looks like we're going to get the Obi Wan trailer.
Yeah, man.
I mean, it just like this never stops. First last week we had, the whole surprise of the Boba Fett trailer just dropping out of nowhere, and we're like, okay, we have to talk about this. Actually, it was just this past Monday, right? Because we bailed on Visions.
Yeah.
We were going to review Visions, and it's like, nope, we got to talk about Obi Wan or Book of Boba Fett.
Well,
now it looks like, and that may not be the only thing. We might even get more stuff. So Ronaldo is actually joining us tonight. So why don't you fill us in a little bit about what's going on? How did all this stuff come about? The Disney Plus Day thing?
Yeah, first of all, when I found out, did you know when it was coming? Disney Plus Day, I mean.
No, I didn't even know. That's the funny thing about it. I didn't even know that was a thing because, we always look at things like either Star Wars Celebration or, that Disney Investors Day, which they thought a lot of things were going to drop on that day. And then some other stuff. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of a surprise. I'm like, Disney Plus Day. I don't even know what that is. And it turns out it's like some new thing.
It's like this whole thing. Yeah, man. So as I was kind of scouring the internet, this thing kind of popped up and I'm like, Disney Plus Day. Okay, let me check this out. And then, I just started seeing all the stuff and I'm just like, oh, yeah, we got to talk about this. Like, we have to. It's really cool because, of course, with the Book of Boba Fett, we just, like you said, we just saw that trailer. Everybody's been clamoring for Obi Wan. So okay, so what they're saying is for the Obi Wan thing is that, well, let me back up a little bit. Back to Boba Fett for just a brief moment. So Boba Fett, although we've already seen the official trailer, so for Disney Plus Day, what they're talking about is actually giving us like a sizzle reel on how that particular project came to be. So I guess we're going to see some behind the scenes stuff.
Well, that is actually
project actually came up.
Yeah, you know what I think that's going to be, because they're releasing what is essentially going to be like a full-length movie type of a thing about Boba Fett. It's going to include some behind the scenes stuff, but it's also going to be a lot about the character himself. And, that's basically the predecessor. I don't remember the date that's coming out, but it is coming out before the Book of Boba Fett premieres. So I have a feeling that this thing that you're talking about might actually be almost like a trailer of sorts for that special.
Yeah, I think they're going to show that. And I think they're going to kind of show that they're going to package that almost kind of like together for this coming December. So that's going to be awesome. Now, on to Obi Wan. So, so Obi-Wan, of course, that's the big thing everybody's been kind of talking about as of late. And last time at I believe it was Investors Day, they had a sizzle reel footage of Obi-Wan. But now, at this point, they actually have enough to make a possible trailer.
Oh,
so
easily.
It hasn't been completely confirmed, but I highly doubt that they're not, for them to not show a trailer for that particular project.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, and we've covered this a lot before, where when you start hearing a lot of these things, I mean, it's almost like with the Book of Boba Fett, and this goes into a comment that Ronaldo just made. He says, after all this time, I'd be surprised if they didn't give us at least a tease of the series. And that's kind of my thinking in the Book of Boba Fett. Now, when they dropped that trailer earlier this week, I should say, it was unexpected, and everybody kind of lost their minds. But if you really stop and think about it, the thing's going to be premiering in like a month. Yeah, exactly. It's like less than 2 months away at this point. So from that standpoint, you would be surprised. Yeah. Now, of course, the big X factor is going to be when is the Obi Wan series going to be released? Because you have to look at it from: are we going to get a full blown trailer, a la Book of Boba Fett, or is this going to be somewhat like what Ronaldo's suggesting, what I think you were saying, which is more like a teaser trailer?
No, I actually think they're actually going to release a. If it's not a, I think they're going to do an official trailer. But let's just say they don't. Let's say they give us the teaser. That's fine, because I think the official trailer is probably going to come sometime, maybe in January.
Well,
beginning of the year.
Isn't the rumor
because it's rumor?
Yeah.
Yeah, the rumor is either February or March we're supposed to be getting it.
Oh, really?
The show.
See, now last I heard, it was going to be on May the 4th. They were going to try to do it with Star Wars Day, so they've actually moved it up?
Possibly. Not to quote
Very Obi-Wan of you, actually.
Yeah, I know, right? So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. And that's where everybody is. So, it could very possibly well be May the 4th. Even if so, okay, they're probably going to show us, okay, coming this May or coming, this spring or something like that. So
or coming in 2022,
Well, right. I hope they don't cheese out that much and, actually kind of give us like at least a month or so, of what, when this project is actually going to be released. But yeah, I think that we're definitely going to see some glimpses of that. And I think this is what the fans are really clamoring about, especially since now, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask Ronaldo and everybody else out here. Do you think we need to see Vader? And do you think we will see Vader?
We'll see. Now, I will answer that question. But it almost steals a little bit of my thunder, because when you were done talking, I was gonna ease in with that. Hey, what do you think we're gonna see in this trailer? But you're already going for specificity right here. You're kind of like, no, are we gonna see Vader? If it's a teaser trailer, I don't think so.
Okay.
But it really depends, because I'm thinking back to the Rogue One trailers where they had a couple of teasers, if I'm not mistaken, where you did not see Vader. And then I think it was like the third or fourth thing, you started seeing, well, a bunch of stuff that wasn't even in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. Where he was on the Death Star and by that control panel or whatever. So I don't know if they really want to give away yet how Vader's going to look or the context, because that's the problem. I mean, sure, you can give a glimpse, and it also depends really on how big he is to the story, like what part, which I think is probably going to be pretty important, because this thing is only going to be like, 6 episodes or something?
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that I personally believe they're not going to show him, but we're going to hear him. Maybe they'll talk about him, and again, now, I might actually have a slightly different answer, though, if it's a full trailer. Because a full trailer is going to be anywhere from like 1.5 to 2 minutes or 2.5 or something like that. And if they do go into that, then I think there is a chance that we're going to see him. And again, I don't think it's going to be enough to give anything away. No.
Think back to The Rise of Skywalker. I remember when the time actually leading up to it, and I'm not talking about just the last few months, I mean pretty much the better part of the year, one of the things that you and I were talking about, especially as they revealed a lot of information in print, and then they showed us a lot of stuff in the trailer by the time that cycle started happening. And I remember one of the things that you and I were talking about all the time was, okay, if they're showing us all this, what are they not showing us? Like how much bigger does this thing get? And of course, the answer was things like Han Solo being in it again. Or Ben being redeemed, or actually instead of like hearing Palpatine, we see, I mean, there are some definite things that they did keep from us. So again, I would have to say that you have to look at it from the standpoint of, if they do show us Vader, they're not going to show the context, and whatever they do show, you always have to keep in mind what they're not showing. They're speaking volumes with their silence. What are we not seeing?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I think, it's almost like in musicians, for you, you play the pauses almost. It's kind of like that moment. And I think that's what they're going to do with the trailer is that they're going to play those pauses for us where, it's going to like, okay, kind of heighten that the anticipation or, drag certain things out just to kind of leave you in a certain kind of space, that uneasiness or where we going here next. I think that's kind of, what's going to happen for the Obi Wan thing. And then the other is Andor. It talked about giving some stuff about Andor. Now, the thing about Andor is interesting is because that's the longest out of the two series, being Book of Boba Fett and Obi Wan. Andor has way more episodes than either one of those.
Yeah,
So
they were almost flirting with the almost kind of like the Bad Batch. Like, how many episodes are there of that show?
Like 10 to 12 or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that was starting to look a little bit
Yeah.
more like what we would actually think a series would be.
Exactly. And so with Andor, I think we're going to get a lot more of that. And they've been working on that for the longest, honestly. They've been working on that even before, these two. So I think we're going to see a couple of different, pieces. I don't know if they're all going to be trailers. I don't know if they're going to be some, pieces here and there, sizzle reels or whatnot. But it's looking really interesting. And then, of course, to kind of tie it all up, we're going to get some glimpses of season 2 of The Bad Batch. So, and then whoever knows what else they could be bringing in. We might get a Lando thing or whatever. Who knows what else
Well,
they've been
you
cooking up over
also,
there.
and that was one of the things. I mean, even titling this show, right? It was kind of like, I mean, obviously, I think I went with Obi-Wan, and I steered the focus more towards the Obi-Wan series simply because I think that that's the greatest chance of what we're going to see. The greatest chance is that we're going to see an Obi-Wan trailer. I would say that's almost, I mean, I hesitate to say confirmed, especially given anything where Lucasfilm is concerned, but I think that's more of a safe bet. The other stuff, I agree. I think that they could actually do that. And one of the things that I've been more or less talking about, I don't know if I've actually brought it up on the show that much, though, is that much like how Ahsoka and The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett are somewhat of a, like a, oh, what's it, the cross?
Yeah, like symbiotic or something, or they're
No,
kind of
it's kind of like when they do crossover. I always want to say
crossovers.
like cross-platform. Like cross-platform is kind of my new buzzword now. But I think with those three series in particular, and you can even throw in Rangers of the New Republic if it ever gets made, is that there's going to be a lot of crossover there. One of the things that I've been thinking for a long time is that you're going to see some crossover with Andor and Obi-Wan. Because if you think about it, Rogue One takes place like, I don't know, like it starts like 3 weeks or something before episode 4. Okay. But Andor obviously is a prequel to Rogue One. It's showing, we don't really know how far back it's going to go, but the idea is it's more like at the height of the beginnings of the Rebel Alliance and how Andor falls into all that. That could very easily, depending on where they go with this Obi-Wan thing and how far, we know it's 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, which would put it around 9 years before episode 4. But what we don't know is how far ahead it goes. We know where it starts, but we don't know where it's going to end necessarily. And I think that one of the things that's really cool is much the same way, let's just take, because we've seen The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett's going to come out. Let's just take those two. In much the same way that has a lot of crossover potential, I think Andor and Obi-Wan does. So it would make sense that maybe you might see a little bit of Andor material at Disney Plus Day along with Obi-Wan, because I think the series ultimately, if they don't directly cross over, I think Obi-Wan will naturally feed into Andor.
Yeah. Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that those two, and because they're kind of dealing with the same timeline, same time period, especially as you get closer to the end, of one, Yeah, you can definitely see it. Especially, you're always hearing those stuff like, oh, what about your friend, the Jedi? Everybody's kind of like whispering
Yeah,
about Obi Wan, back and forth.
right.
So, it stands to reason that could be very much the case. Absolutely.
Well, and I think that that's it. Now, I don't know. At the time that they made Rogue One, I know they were flirting with the idea of the Mandalorian. I don't know how far in advance, because remember, Obi Wan was originally supposed to be a movie.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, so much so that it was, I forgot who the writer, but they actually had somebody that was going to write it, direct it. It was well on its way to being a movie, possibly even a trilogy. So I don't really know how far in advance they were plotting all this stuff. And at that time, Lucasfilm wasn't exactly going to be accused of planning anything anytime soon. That's more of a recent development. Recently, now in the period that we're in now, you could see that they're actually making more of a concerted effort to plan things out. And of course, that's showing in the quality that we're getting out of Star Wars, which is why everybody's like, why didn't they do this back when they were making the sequel trilogy? But I
Mm-hmm.
guess it's a live and learn thing.
Yeah.
Lucas created Star Wars, and it wasn't so much that he knew what to do with it from a commercial perspective, but it was essentially his little independent film.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, he just more or less did whatever he wanted to. And even that fell in and out of favor,
Yeah, I mean, like it's like we've often said, it's different when it's coming from the creator versus coming from somebody else who's taking the creation. It has
Exactly.
a completely different vibe to it, and so
Exactly.
that's what now people can judge it a little bit differently because it's not in the hands of the creator.
Right. Now, Ronaldo
No,
says, before we get to
okay.
anything else, he says, being an event dedicated to Disney Plus, do you think we will have previews of other projects? He goes on to say, not necessarily trailers or teasers, let's say interviews, concept art, casting news for the Acolyte, for example.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
well, we
yeah.
could
That's
throw
what I was
that
actually about to
Obi-Wan
get
thing,
into.
possibly. Oh,
Well, that's what I was actually kind of getting to because, and thanks, Ronaldo. I think we're going to see stuff like they're going to be talking to Rosario Dawson about Ahsoka. I think we're going to see, hear from at least from uh, was it Heather? Uh,
you're talking about
l-
Leslie Headland, I think, or
yes, yeah,
something
Leslie
like
had,
that.
yeah, Leslie Headland. I can't want to say handy side, but you know why.
I know
But
why.
anyway,
Well, but here's the thing, though: the Acolyte isn't even supposed to, by all accounts, it's not even supposed to start shooting until later in 2022. So I don't know. I'm not really entirely sure exactly how much they're going to prop that up. When you actually think about all the stuff they got coming out in 2022, I think the Ahsoka thing is way more on point because I would argue, and other people have put forth this argument as well, the Ahsoka series is probably the most important of the series moving forward. It has a lot riding
yes,
on it, and it's going to
I would
contain
agree.
a lot,
Yeah, and it has a lot of questions to still to answer. Whereas, and that's the thing, with Obi Wan, you're kind of creating a story within a story. You know what I'm saying? But like Ahsoka's story kind of never wasn't really truly finished because of how it ended. It's like okay, especially now when you bring her back in a Mandalorian, that opened it up right back at to the full spectrum, and that's because when we saw it, it's like okay, Vader walked out, she didn't, but then you saw this little. They kind of focus on this little mystery bird that was kind of flying around, and she's been popping. That little bird has been popping up in different places, and it's always been deemed to be Ahsoka. And then now we finally see her in her true form years after that battle, and she's running around asking about Thrawn. So it's like, okay, wait a minute, how did you get out of that fight with Vader? I mean, that's you can't not answer that. So, and I think, like you said, going forward, she is a pivotal piece. And then I also feel like with Obi Wan, yeah, you're kind of once again you're telling the story within the story. Like you got Obi Wan, we kind of know what he was doing. You kind of know
That's
his
the
whole
thing.
purpose. It's just kind of like, all right, here's some little other nuggets that was going on at that time.
Well, it's
It's almost
basically
kind of like that
detailing. It's filling in the gaps.
War of the Bounty Hunters is kind of the same thing. It's like
Very much
we
so.
know what happened between 4 and 5, or 5 and 6, really.
Well,
And it's
yes
like,
and
okay,
no. I mean, see,
that's
with
what I'm
War
saying.
of
Like
the
this
Bounty
whole
Hunters,
thing.
it's a little different, being that they're focusing on something that, because again, as far as we were concerned with that, Boba Fett left Cloud City and took on Solo to Jabba's palace and got paid, and now he was hanging on Jabba's wall when we meet him again in Return of the Jedi, which of course is
Hmm.
strengthened by the fact that Boba Fett's there,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
With the War of the Bounty Hunters, though, what they did with that was they brought up something that was somewhat inconceivable. Now, I'm kind of hoping that's what they do with Obi Wan, actually, is that because, again, and this is where I think what you're trying to point out here is the fact that, as far as we're concerned, he drops off Luke at the Lars homestead. He
Hmm.
kind of chills out and watches over him. And then at the
Hmm.
appointed time, he's like, all right, now you got to come and train with me. But
Hmm.
again, much like what we were seeing with the War of the Bounty Hunters, and no, this wasn't as linear as what we were led to believe. I think they could do the same thing with the Obi Wan series. They could give us a lot and take this in directions that we had no idea. Now, where I wholeheartedly agree with your overall point, though, and in fact, it was something I was going to bring up myself, is that with Obi Wan, you kind of, it's bookended. You know basically where it's been and where it's going. All you're really doing is just filling in a bunch of information and maybe taking it to places we didn't expect. Whereas with Ahsoka, that's the sequel type of a thing, right? That's the
Hmm.
open-ended. There's no bookend
Yeah.
there. I mean, the closest you can come is maybe by saying, well, she's not around in the sequel trilogy, so therefore maybe she perished or something. But then again, you could have said that about the original trilogy too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Of course,
Absolutely. I mean,
well,
go
there
ahead.
is one difference though. The one difference is when the sequel trilogy was made, Ahsoka was actually created. So, to me, that's a little bit more definitive because obviously the reason why she wasn't in the original trilogy is she hadn't been created yet.
True.
That's the out of universe explanation, anyway.
Answer. Yeah. Right. Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's really going to be a cool it's going to be a cool showing. I'm sure they're probably going to give us a bunch of information. Like you said, even if they don't show us anything about the acolyte, which I can understand why, but even if they just mention it, like, okay, in the latter half of the year, we're going to bring you X, Y, and Z, and we have the show created here. She's excited to tell you about a little bit more about that, so you guys can kind of start to have your side conversations about that. So I think we will get that. I think we're going to get kind of a wealth of stuff, and of course it's Disney Plus Day, so of course they got to talk about all the other Disney stuff. Of course still got to do with Marvel, which is another huge property. So of course it all can't be wrapped up under Star Wars, which I'm sure that's where Celebration and everything else will kind of flush everything out, because we still waiting on we still haven't heard any information about Rogue Squadron yet.
No, and it's going to
So
open in like a year and a half. Or,
yeah, so
well, really more like 2 years. I think it's like December of 2023 or something. So 2 years.
yeah, so yeah,
But
but like I said, it's sooner than saying I'm sure we're going to be hearing stuff about that pretty soon.
I would hope so.
So you know um I'm just really excited for all the different stuff that's really going to come on. But Obi-Wan it should be a really interesting thing. I'm really curious of what they're going to show us. And like you said, it's also, you got to think about, what are they not showing us. So if Vader doesn't end up in this first trailer or whatever we see, he's definitely probably going to end up in the official one, in my opinion, because we already know he's coming. So it's not a
Yeah, I
secret.
mean, but in a way, though, I almost agree with what you were saying earlier when you're kind of like, well, it's more like we'll hear him. Because if you think about the Palpatine stuff, we never
Yeah,
saw Palpatine in the trailers. We just heard him. First, it was kind of
I
like
thought we
his
did.
laugh or something.
The first one was the laugh, but then
The The second one, it was him kind of narrating a lot of the action.
But then at the very end, they showed him like, I mean, you couldn't see his face, but you saw him kind of like in that little machine standing over Ray.
Oh yeah, right. Well, that was like, and that was many trailers later though. That was getting toward the. I mean, it's true. It was probably more like the third one, I think. But you're right. There was the one where he was kind of hovering, and it was, kind of like that, almost that over the shoulder shot. Yeah, that crazy apparatus. Ronaldo says, "I have another question. Do you think there will be any surprises, like a new project?" Like a crossover between Star Wars and MCU. Just kidding. That would be a terrible idea.
A horrible idea.
I mean, as I pointed out,
Eternals versus
well, but Star Trek in a way did it, right? They had that one Next Generation novel where it was Star Trek: The Next Generation meets the X-Men, and it was a very bizarre thing. I mean, I should have bought it actually. I read some of it in the store because I just couldn't help myself. I'm like, I've got to see. Like I can't imagine Wolverine and Captain Picard or Professor X because like later on he was actually cast, right?
Well, that's what I was about to say. Like, it'd been funny, like if Xavier looked at himself was like, "Wow, I'm a space captain too."
Well, and that's it because that book was written before those movies came out, and right. I just think that that's really hilarious. I mean, that's quite a bit of foreshadowing if you think about it. Because I mean,
I can see Wolverine and Worf getting into it though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that kind of thing has been done, right? So it's one of those things where it could... I honestly think that in a lot of ways, Star Wars could fit more into a Marvel or something like that. Because one of the things about Star Wars is that it takes place in a galaxy a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Now, of course... the long time ago part maybe precludes it a little bit, but you could get around that. I mean, even Ronaldo just said himself, he was like, I think Vader's castle appeared in Marvel's What If series. I'll have to check that out.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think we might get some surprises. I mean, you never know. I think, we might see some stuff in Bad Batch because like I said, that's going to come back, which I'm excited for. What else is there? You got Bad Batch.
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
They might bring up.
I'm glad you framed it this way because one of the reasons why when you're kind of like, well, I don't know, we could see some Acolyte stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, anything's possible. I didn't think a trailer was dropping Monday for the Book of Boba Fett either, but it did, right? I mean,
here we are, right?
Yeah, I mean, so. Again, I'm that guy that's like, okay, I'll never say never when it comes to anything Star Wars related. But that said, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that because the Acolyte is so far away, it's not even going to start shooting to the end of the year. You have to think about how much stuff is coming out in 2022. Like big. You have Ahsoka, you have Obi Wan, you have Andor, you have Season 3 of The Mandalorian. You have Bad Batch Season 2. I think there's something else in there, too. So, that's a lot. And I think that they're going to want to focus more on what's actually coming out this year. Now, that does not necessarily mean that they won't tease the Acolyte, because they did announce it. And you're right. I'd like to know what's happening with this stupid Lando series. They mentioned that at the Investors Day, I think it was. And then it's like nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, absolutely nothing.
But I understand, though. I mean, like you said, they might still want to be focused on everything that they got coming up. And so, I didn't even touch on Mandalorian Season 3, but yeah, definitely. So, you got some flagship shows that's really going to, or some major shows, and one of them happens to be your flagship show. That's really going to be, putting the pressure on all of us, to watch these series, because now, like you said, we're going to be so inundated. Like as soon as one ends, the next one is beginning, and that's what I love though. It's because, it's like, okay, even though something may be a limited series, that's fine because, all right, after Book of Boba Fett, that's kind of like, a shorter series. Then Obi Wan comes out limited series. Then right after that, you might have Bad Batch. Right after that, you got Ahsoka, and then right
Yeah,
after that, you got
that's the
Mandalorian. I
best.
mean, it's just like
It's the best move
yeah.
because you're not getting bored or whatever. Because the danger is, again, if you try to use the old TV series model, which is like usually 22 episodes,
Mm-hmm.
one of the problems with that, especially if you had an hour-long drama, now, of course, with something like The Mandalorian or whatever, that was never an issue. You know,
Right.
with the king of like the 15-minute episode. I mean, there's some Visions episodes that are longer than that. But which, by the way, the episode that we reviewed, I think it's a couple of weeks ago now, episode 4, the Village Bride, is
Mhm.
nominated for an Oscar.
Oh wow.
Yeah, was nominated for an Oscar. So there's something to it. And of
I guess
course,
so.
be sure to watch Monday at 8. We're gonna plow through episode 5. But one of the things that you have to look at is that, first of all, you're relieved of the pressure to come up with what is essentially filler episodes when you have these
Mhm.
shorter, more concise episode length series. If you only do like a 6 to 10 episode series, then everything counts. Now, of course, as we've seen in The Mandalorian, you could actually have a filler episode, which, like that spider egg episode, or that,
Egg.
yeah, where
Mhm.
the frog lady was, but then again, if a lot of people will call that a filler episode. Now, at the time, if you go back and watch a review of that episode, we said that it was anything but. Of course, a lot of that was dependent on the fact of what was going to come later, because that was only like the second episode of the season. So we're
Mhm.
kind of like, well, we don't think it is. But really, and this is what I think is the advantage of these kind of series, is if you think about it, that particular episode was really part of like a 2 or 3 episode story arc. So it was
Right.
never really meant to be taken on its own. You can't call it a filler episode. But at the same time, when you're trying to come up with these long series to fill up a year, you get a lot of filler episodes. Whereas you just pointed out, you could just hit them, one after the other. Okay,
Mhm.
now you have Book of Boba Fett. Now you got Ahsoka. Now you got Obi Wan. Now you got Andor. I mean, you're never really bored. You're always focusing on a different part of the universe, which is another thing that I think people don't really look at, is that you can focus now on the universe as a whole and use each of these series to tell somewhat isolated stories, but of a greater thing, almost like what they were doing with the High Republic.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's even rumors and talks, just for you, Ronaldo, of doing a Maul series.
Oh
Darth
yeah, you
Maul.
did. You did.
Yeah,
Yeah, you sent me a bunch of stuff like over the
yeah,
last
that's what I'm
2
saying.
days, man. I couldn't even read it all.
Yeah, it's crazy, but like Darth Maul is supposed to be getting his, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Eric, about it, because you had just talked about it, about him, so how he took over Crimson Dawn and that whole Kira thing, and
Yeah,
like
you're right.
there's real talk that like now I think it's in a comic book that's coming up where Kira and Leia actually meet each other. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's like going on, and they may be exploring that, in the very near future. So
Yeah, that was the
you know,
last. I don't remember if it was the War of the Bounty Hunters, but it was something in that series that was so funny because Lando was kind of like, well, Kira was this. Oh yeah, never mind. She's all like, what? And he's like, well, she was like, oh really? It was kind of like she was getting a little bit jealous because she's only now learning that Han had this, whole
other
love
woman.
interest. Yeah, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. So she has a couple of different reasons why she's a little bit interested in that. But again, there is so much that we can focus on in 2022 that it really makes you wonder what kind of a release schedule they're going to do, that's another thing I'm hoping that we get. Everybody was talking about, oh, are we going to see this trailer? Are we going to see that trailer? And don't get me wrong, I'm right there
All
with
game for it.
everybody. What I want release dates.
Mhm.
That's what I really hope to get out of this thing. Let's see, Ronaldo. A Darth Maul TV series? Is that real?
Yeah, I mean, apparently, it's very highly, um,
It's real-ish.
it's not confirmed, but
Yeah,
it's up there. You know what I mean?
well,
And
they've
it's
been
supposed to be an
talking about
animated
it for a
series.
while.
Yeah, they've actually been talking about it since early this. No, I'm sorry, since 2020. Actually,
Yeah,
they've
they've
been
been,
talking about it,
and they've actually
threatening
been
about.
really floating. Yeah, and seriously, they've been talking about it since then. But they've been, well, you've heard rumors about it even before then. But they've been sort of toying with the idea of maybe a Darth Maul standalone film, or,
Yeah,
you know,
because they realize he's such a favorite and everybody just loves him. But of course, Sam Witwer just adds so much character, to Maul and the conflict and different things that he has, and he really just plays Darth Maul really well. So um, they're thinking of really giving him his own series, just called Maul, and it's really just going to chronicle his takeover of Crimson Dawn, and we're kind of following him on his adventures of the whole criminal underworld, which is cool because then he becomes like an anti-hero. He's always a villain, but then like in this capacity, it sounds like they'll be making him more like an anti-hero. So that would really be interesting
well, not only
if they do
that,
that.
yeah, if they do that, well, it makes sense. Because if they do it in animated form, then they don't have to worry about trying to get Ray Park back, which I know that he kind of ran
Yeah,
afoul of everybody at Lucasfilm for
yeah,
some things. So the animated way is a way to keep Sam Witwer doing it. Plus, you could do a little bit more because you don't have to worry about casting. It's all voice acting at this point. And you could
yeah,
tell that story because that was one of the things that I wanted to see in a Solo too. I wanted to see more of the Crimson Dawn thing, and especially because they're bringing it up in War of the Bounty Hunters, and now you're seeing a return to Crimson Dawn in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I mean, hey, they're obviously doing this for a reason. See, now I think that all this stuff is being done for a reason. I don't think there's any accidental type of a thing going on where when they were making the sequel trilogy, it was almost like they were throwing darts at a dartboard. When they were picking
hmm
directors for all these different things, it's like, yeah, this is a great idea. We love this person, whatever. And then, 3 weeks later, they're fired 50% into their movie. You're not seeing
hmm
that anymore. Let me get this Ronaldo comment in here. He says, I'm surprised we haven't seen Sam Witwer in any Star Wars project, not counting cameos. He's a great actor. Yeah,
Oh yeah, we
well,
loved him. We loved him on the show Smallville.
yeah. Actually, that was where I was introduced to him. And when
hmm
he started voicing Maul in, was he actually Maul in
Clone
Clone
Wars.
Wars? I know he
Yep.
was in Rebels, but I couldn't remember if he was in Clone Wars or not.
hmm
So, and he was amazing in that last season of Rebels.
Yeah, he also does Palpatine too.
Yeah. Yeah, because he took over for the guy that unfortunately passed away. He was doing the first couple of seasons. He was Palpatine for the first couple of seasons of Clone Wars, and then he unfortunately died. And then I think Witwer took over for him. But yeah, we've
hmm
been a Sam Witwer, since Smallville, which is ironic because, you would. That was kind of a weird. Because the whole time I was thinking, wow, is that the guy from Smallville? I mean, and it was.
Yeah.
And then, of
Yep.
course, he would guest on Jedi Council a lot of times when,
hmm
for either
Yep. Him and Freddie
AMC
Prinze
or.
Jr.
Yeah, yeah, over at Collider. So, it was one of those things that he got really, I guess, ingratiated with the fan base, especially, I think, after the whole Solo movie when he was the voice of Darth Maul in that. Because honestly, that's a cameo that has sort of died down, but that was one of my favorite all-time cameos from any of the Star Wars stuff. When
Which
Maul
one?
ignites that lightsaber, like at the end of Solo.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
First of
yeah,
all, I didn't
definitely.
see that coming either. I mean, that was kind of
Oh,
like
not
a,
at all.
whoa. It's like, and then when
Yeah.
he ignites the lightsaber and you find out he's the guy pulling all the strings, I mean, there's a part of you that's going, oh yeah, of course, it's Maul again. They're
Of course, yeah.
shoehorning Maul into like every For everybody that said after the Phantom Menace, like, it's too bad they killed off this really cool character. They could have done a lot with him. Yeah, well, now he's in everything.
Yeah, I wonder if it'd be funny if they could have did that with Phasma.
That would be wonderful. I mean, it's not too late. She could pop up in Rogue Squad. Well, no, that takes place after.
No,
but they could start to
see her thing. I can't see her surviving. Maul, I could, just simply because of the whole Force thing. But her being just a regular human, yeah, that whole fire pit that she just fell into, like, I don't know.
Yeah, but he was cut in half,
all metal
though.
suit.
I can hang with it, but he was cut in half.
The path to the dark side, has abilities to believe to be unnatural, man,
and unrealistic. So Ronaldo says he was great in Smallville, Battlestar Galactica, Supergirl. Jeez, I didn't know he was in those. It would be cool to see him in a Star Wars live-action project. Well, you kind of did.
About him. Well, the cool thing about Sam is that he's a super fan. Like, he's not just like a voice actor, but he's really into Star Wars. They've put him on different shows, where they're like testing like your Star Wars knowledge. I mean, he
beat everybody.
Man. Yeah, man, he's like, he's amazing.
He is. Ronaldo also says before Snoke's death, there was Maul's, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But see, Snoke didn't come back, though.
He wasn't as strong as Maul. Maul was a Sith.
Well, technically, Snoke was Palpatine. He was just like a failed clone. That's actually another thing I want to get to. There's I had covered it on one of the shows that I did solo, where there was all these books that came out, or they were announced. It's the 2022 lineup.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called? Secrets of the Sith or something like that. There's like a lot of cool stuff. It almost seems like they're going to take a lot of, like Darth Plagueis, that book that James Luceno wrote. I think they're going to actually take some of that stuff, which of course was relegated to the old legends, just like everything else. But I think they're going to canonize part of that again through this book. But from some of the excerpts that I read, it seems fantastic. And so there's a lot that I think that we can actually look forward to in this. I mean, first of all, when they said Disney Plus Day, it was kind of weird, but it does make sense, because if you think about it, it was only a couple of years ago that they just launched this thing, and The Mandalorian was its only original show. And now, you had another season of The Mandalorian under your belt, plus all these Star Wars projects that they're coming out with, which, of course, I think they're going to heavily feature. But then, like you pointed out, they have all these Marvel shows. WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, all this stuff that's come out that's also popular, that's also going to get other seasons. So I think that it's just going to explode, and it makes sense that they had to do this. So Ronaldo says, do you think we are not going to see Snoke again? I think there's a possibility.
I don't think so.
I don't either. I don't think that there's a possibility. I mean, if it does happen, it's going to be in a comic, or it's going to be maybe in a book. I don't actually see Snoke coming back. But I have to be honest, and I said the same thing about Maul too. And that's the problem, is that if you had talked to me in 99, and you're just like, oh, well, Maul was cool, but, I mean, he's probably going to be in future stuff. I mean, anybody would have laughed at you back then. It's like, dude, he was cut in half and fell down a shaft.
That's a little rhyme you did there.
There's not a lot more permanence to a death that you could ascribe to a character than this. And yet, out comes little Spider Maul in the Clone Wars. Then he gets his two legs, and then he gets shoehorned into... I'm surprised Lucas didn't just shove him in the original trilogy special editions. And don't get me wrong, I love Maul. I'm not complaining about it. Actually, I think that at first I was like, okay, I'm not sure I can hang with this yet, but the more I saw, though, I was really enamored with his story. And then, of course, by the time it got to Rebels, I was fully on board.
Now, to take us back just a little bit, because it just occurred to me with the Obi Wan series.
Yeah, we should actually talk about the Obi Wan, since that is the title of the show.
So, with the trailer, if we don't see Vader, do you think we'll see the Inquisitors?
I do think we're going to see the Inquisitors. And the reason being cool. is because I think that with only 6 episodes, and I think that, I keep saying that, but I'm pretty sure it was only 6 episodes. You have to show some sort of antagonist.
Mm-hmm. That could be formidable against Obi Wan.
Right. You don't necessarily want to pull the Vader card yet, but the Inquisitor thing, because that will get people interested. And I also think that with only 6 episodes, it's like, well, there's not a whole lot. I mean, I guess they could pack a lot of different things, and depending on, number one, the length of the episodes. Because, I mean, if you make them, say, like 45, 50 minutes a pop, they're almost twice as long as the Mandalorian episodes, at least on average at that point. So, that would be like a 12-episode Mandalorian season. So you could. But the thing is, I strongly believe we're going to see the Inquisitors. But I'm not so sure about Vader. I wouldn't rule him out.
So they're about 6 episodes and an hour long, according to McGregor.
Oh, really? Oh, well, see, there you go. They're an hour long. Well, now it's like a 6-hour movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be almost a trilogy. Hey, Dwight's here. Dwight says, there will be episodes. Well, yes, there will.
Thank you, Dwight.
It's very profound.
That's Dwight for you, man.
I think there might even be quite a few episodes.
More than one, I believe.
More than one. Well, he did say plural, right?
Yes. I just like pick with Dwight, but no, yeah, I think that's really going to be cool. Now, we might see that honestly in the trailer, is if we see those Inquisitors, especially Sun Kang, because I think you kind of want to showcase like who's all going to be in this thing to kind of hype it up. So I think that's going to be cool. And especially, you show that red blade, everybody's going to automatically think Vader, but that could be like the whole misdirection thing that Star Wars loves to do.
Well, yes and no, because if you think about it, if you start seeing somebody igniting a red blade, you're automatically going to be like, well, who's sending this guy? Because everybody already knows that Vader's in it. I mean, unless there's a casual fan, they maybe they don't, but.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Dwight says, I meant 6. And so Ronaldo follows it up. If there's a teaser, I don't think we'll see Vader in it.
All right, okay, so you side with Eric on that. I mean, I kind of pretty much agree with it as well. Like, I think, if it's a teaser, we probably won't see Vader. But if it's a full length, likely. If we don't see him, we'll probably hear him.
Yeah, and I'm fully on board with that.
Talking or breathing.
I am fully on board with that. I think we're going to hear him because they're going to want to frame things around Vader. And again, I'll go back to what I was saying before, where it really depends on how critical Vader is to the story that they're trying to tell. Is Vader really more of a support character, or is he kind of a main focus type of a thing? That's really what's going to determine whether or not he's in the trailer. And of course, Ronaldo even says the Inquisitors might be possible. I think they're going to be more than possible. I would almost bet that the Inquisitors will be there, only because you need to see a Force-using villain of some sort to show that.
I think we're going to see them in the beginning. I think the Inquisitors are going to show up in the beginning to deal with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan might be sneaking around trying to do some stuff. Inquisitors pop out. I think they're going to probably report to Vader like, hey, you got a Jedi running around. He's pretty powerful too. He's not like the other ones we try to kill. This guy is actually kind of strong. So who the heck is this guy? And then, what does he look like? Or, they kind of do some reconnaissance. Vader finds out it's Obi-Wan. He's like, okay, you know what? I'll have to deal with this one. And then that's how we get that battle. that just makes the most sense to me. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, anything at this point, anything is possible. I always have to go on record as saying that. And a lot of times it can be seen as kind of a cop-out because, that's really the easy thing to say because it's incredibly vague. Ronaldo has an interesting question, though. He says, has there been any rumor as to whether Ahsoka will be in this series? And again, it really depends on how crossover-ish they want to be with this stuff. Because you could actually put her in this as somewhat of a prequel in a way to set up a prequel, because I do think that they're going to deal with some of this in the Ahsoka series itself. But you could. But again, it's tough to say because Ahsoka pops up after a while in Rebels, which of course takes place a little bit closer to Episode 4 than Obi Wan does. That doesn't mean that she wouldn't be in it, but that one I would say is a 50-50 chance. And then Dwight says, I don't remember Inquisitors after Season 3 of Rebels. Well, that's fine, because Obi-Wan technically takes place before Rebels.
It's before Rebels, yeah.
So it still works. Fortunately, it's like the story group is actually showing up now. They're kind of doing their jobs. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should actually start trying to use a little thing called continuity. Because they were starting to lose it a little bit. They were in danger of almost painting themselves into a corner or something. But now I think that you're starting to get a little bit more of a unified Lucasfilm as a whole, to where the stories are starting to have a little bit more continuity. They're making more sense. They're certainly becoming more compelling. You're getting a lot of crossover. I don't know. But then Dwight says, won't their two series take place during two different time periods? So, just to be clear for everybody, Obi-Wan takes place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, which is about 9 years before A New Hope. Rebels takes place, I think they said that it starts about 3 years before A New Hope, but I could be wrong. It could be a little bit less than that. Because Rogue One is 3 weeks before A New Hope. But you got to remember, there's 4 or 5, what was there, 4 seasons of Rebels, or was there 5?
Rebels?
Yeah.
I think it was, I want to say 5.
Now, one of the guys will chat in. But if it was 5, that even strengthens it. But even if there was 4, right? You have to, in order to have 4 full seasons, they don't necessarily all have to be 1 year, but, there's a lot going on there. So it takes place enough. And Dwight was clarifying and says, hey, I meant the Ahsoka series. He also says there was 4 seasons of Rebels. Okay. The Ahsoka series. Yeah, and now I understand what Dwight's saying. He's talking about the comment that I made about Ahsoka possibly being in Obi-Wan and the whole crossover thing. Yeah, they do take place during 2 different time periods, but remember that Obi-Wan takes place after the Clone Wars, where Ahsoka was firmly in, right? And then, of course, she shows up again in Rebels, which is probably maybe 7, 6, 5, somewhere around there, 5, 6 years after Obi-Wan. And again, we don't know how far into the future Obi-Wan goes. So Obi-Wan could cross over during the time period of Rebels, which is where Ahsoka makes her next appearance. And that's what I was pointing out, where once the Obi-Wan series is done or whatever, if it does feature Ahsoka in it, it can act almost as a prequel to what we might see in the Ahsoka series. Because remember, when we see her in The Mandalorian, one of the immediate questions that everybody instantly has is, well, hey, where were you during the original trilogy? Did you ever meet Luke? Did you talk to Yoda? I mean, there's a lot of questions. And so what they could do is they could use all these series that are taking place around the original trilogy to start to begin to answer those questions by putting it in the context of that time period. And so then when you take it all into totality, you're kind of like, oh, okay, now I understand.
Yeah, because the way they have, I'm looking at some of these people's timeline. The timeline is basically, so after episode 3, you have Solo. Obi Wan is kind of in the middle of Solo. After Solo and Obi Wan, you have Rebels. Rebels and Cassian Andor are kind of like in the same time period, and then Rogue One bumps right up against
A New Hope.
A New Hope.
Mm-hmm. So you could easily do that. You can use some of these series and put these characters that are in proper context of the time period, so that way you don't have to do flashback. So why would you actually want to do a flashback in the Ahsoka series and take up precious episode time in the Ahsoka series when you can accomplish the same thing right during a series that it pertains to? Mm-hmm. So to me, that's actually one of the unique opportunities that Star Wars has right now, is rather than spending any time with flashback scenes, you can just go, okay, well, we have a series that's taking place around that time period. Let's just drop that in there, and then there you go.
Yeah.
You know, it makes a lot of sense, and I don't actually remember that really being used in any franchises that I know of. Or at least I can think of offhand. But it's easily something that they could do. And to me, that would make a lot more sense than trying to shoehorn in flashback scenes, which I think Star Wars fans are a little bit more open to the idea of flashbacks. Because remember, one of the biggest things when they said they were going to do flashbacks, there were rumors that they were either going to be in The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker. I don't remember which. But I remember that was one of the things that, I mean, people were just up in arms about. Like, you can't have flashbacks in Star Wars. It's not a Star Wars thing.
Yeah, they work perfectly in The Last Jedi.
Yeah, and that's it. You have to, even though to say the word perfectly in The Last Jedi in a sentence usually will get people up in arms.
Yes, I know.
The thing is that on one hand, and this is a challenge that any filmmaker, any series head or writer, any showrunner, one of the biggest things, the challenges that these guys have to face is the fact that it has to maintain that Star Wars feel and that Star Wars look, but you do want to expand it a little bit. You know, you don't want to shackle yourself to only what George Lucas did. You want to use that as a template, but you don't want to use that as pretty much
be all end all.
Yeah, like you don't want to put limitations. Dwight says if they put her in Kenobi, they would have to explain why she disappeared and why Kenobi would think she is gone.
Well, they're gonna have to do that anyway.
Yeah,
with her in her own series, because I mean, I know Dwight, you weren't here earlier, but like, you know, she had to battle with Vader in Rebels, and then, you know, Vader walked out maimed and kind of messed up, but we didn't see Ahsoka come out. But then they kind of focused on that little owl looking thing, which everybody kind of believed to be Ahsoka. And then how do you explain her popping up all the way in the timeline of the Mandalorian? So once you brought her back, you automatically have to explain the same way like you got Boba Fett. Like, how did you get out the Sarlacc pit? You kind of have to explain that to people, because last we saw, we presumed you dead. And then, like you said, it, you know, the whole original trilogy went by. Why didn't you go help Luke?
Yeah, I mean, you know, even more so, as much as the Boba Fett thing has to be explained, the Ahsoka thing really has to be explained.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's one of the things that I think that they have to do. Ronaldo says a flashback is a storytelling tool that the creator has. Use it well and it'll work. And that's it. That's actually it. Now Dwight also says that boy is our only hope from Kenobi and Empire comes to mind. But you also have to remember, and this is one of the things that, and this has been like a thing for a long time, is that the common thing is that it was referring to Leia, right? That Leia's, when Yoda said no, there is another, that other that Yoda was referring to was Leia. There's actually rumors, though, that it was somebody else. Now, from everything that I've heard from Lucas himself, it was always going to be Leia, because in fact, she was the one that was really, they wanted to train. Because she doesn't really suffer from the same problems. Exactly. She could have actually been more powerful. And in fact, Rise of Skywalker was really going to focus on all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She was going to be the one that was going to come into power. I mean, if Carrie Fisher hadn't passed, it would have been a Leia-centric movie. She would have come into her own. She's going to have a lightsaber duel. I mean, forever. I mean, as much as I'm, as a human being, I'm really sad that she passed away and all that. The fan in me is sad that it's just like, oh, why couldn't she have hung on through the episode 9? Or why couldn't they have, moved up this timeline by a year or something? Because I really would have liked to have seen a lightsaber wielding. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would have, just from a fan perspective, I mean, sure, it's tragic that the woman died and all that, but focusing purely on the franchise and the story and all that, it's an absolute tragedy that it happened because of what could have been with that character.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing about, Ahsoka, people keep asking about Ahsoka, like, well, where was she doing the original trilogy? You have to remember, she was exiled from the Jedi Temple. Like, she wasn't a Jedi anymore, so it wasn't her fight.
That's the other thing, too, and that's how they could really explain this stuff away, is the fact that she wasn't really a Jedi at that point. And she didn't even care. I mean, honestly, she only really ran into Din and discovered Grogu and all this other stuff, and she was kind of reluctantly helping them at first. She wasn't really offering, like, okay, I'll go and I'll take them back. She's just all like, listen, I'll find out some information to make this a little bit easier for you, and then, yeah, good luck with what you're doing. And then she walked away.
But I think she also, her focus is more so, she's dedicated to the relationship she built with Ezra and Sabine and, those guys and Hera. So she kind of found herself like almost like a new family in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, that's her whole focus now.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ronaldo says, technically, and he's talking about Leia, we saw her as a Jedi in flashback. And that's what I'm talking about. It's like when you saw that, it made you go, man, I want to see more of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. Yeah.
And you call it, even that whole little Mary Poppins thing that she did. I mean, it's kind of cheesy and as it was. I mean, it was cool, but cheesy at the same time. But it just kind of showed you that Leia was like more powerful than what most people thought. That's the reason why I enjoyed it. But the way that they did it was kind of like,
it was a little hokey, yeah. It was. There could have been other ways that they could have done it. Again, as a fan, especially as a fan since 77, and then after you see Return of the Jedi and realize, hey, she's also Vader's kid, she's Luke's sister, hey, she must possess the Force, and he even says, in time you'll learn to use this power as I have. Ever since that moment, your mind goes like, man, I really want to see Leia use the Force now, or... So,
go ahead. Go ahead. No, I just always thought, like, that scene where she, she kind of blew out the ship. See, I always thought would have been cool if she actually used the Force to stop herself from flying out and stopped anybody else from flying out with it. Like, she kind of grounded herself with the Force and pushed everybody else back with the Force. That would have just been amazing, because that's what everybody would have realized, like, whoa, okay, like, she's super powerful. But you got her unconsciously using the Force while she's out of space and flying back into the space shuttle like she's Superman or something like that. It was weird.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, on one hand, it was like, okay, it's a long time dream that finally has come true, that in some capacity you're seeing this character finally using the Force. Not just as a diplomat trying to influence people, that kind of thing. But the way they did it, though, is bad. Now, Ronaldo says that I was never a fan of Jedi Leia. I like her using the Force and being wise, but not using a lightsaber. See, and for me, I don't know. I would kind of like to see a lot of that stuff. Because honestly, what I would have liked to have seen is her going up against Palpatine at the end, if they were going to bring Palpatine back. Because in Return of the Jedi, you had Luke going up against him. And now he comes back, but now Leia goes up against him. I think that would have been cool.
A young Leia, I mean, see, the cool thing about Leia's character is she almost can be like the whole Superman type, or Supergirl in a way, where she's kind of like, you kind of know her as this politician. She does all this stuff, almost kind of like how Palpatine was. See, that's how I would envision Leia. Yep. Almost like this, a reverse version of Palpatine.
Yep,
where
a light side Palpatine. Exactly.
Yeah, she uses the Force in that manner, but like if you back her into a corner or in certain situations, or let's just say she gets captured and, diplomacy is not really working and she realized, okay, I really have to get out of here. Then she's like, okay, I guess I gotta, break out the Force and bring out a lightsaber, wipe everybody out, put the lightsaber away, walk around and act like nothing happened, like Yoda used to, and it was just kind of like that kind of cool, sneaky, like I have it, but she can't, because she can't reveal it to too many people, because then it's like, oh, okay, well, are you using Jedi mind tricks on us? Are you and it unravels her whole political thing. So I would love to see her kind of do that and be almost like a Palpatine. Like you always said, Palpatine will find himself in those situations where, his life is practically hanging in the balance and he can't reveal that he's a Sith Lord. He just kind of has to.
That's gotta hurt. Because
exactly.
He's watching these guys like struggling with this stuff, and he's probably thinking like, "Oh my, I could totally just end this right now."
Kill this thing. Right.
And
exactly.
But no, he's got to be the frail little emperor or whatever, and yeah, that's got to hurt him. But again, that would be cool too. But it would be cool because again, I'm not necessarily saying that Leia and Palpatine getting a lightsaber duel. Actually, it would make more sense if they got into more of like a Force lightning kind of thing or, whatever.
More like knowledge of the Force in a way.
Yeah, basically almost like,
and that was
a little bit like a Dooku and Yoda thing maybe, but.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think Luke was kind of already, and that was the cool thing about them is that they both could kind of take opposite sides. Like Luke was known as kind of like the warrior, the true knight, kind of, if you will. So he's kind of like Iron Man. Like everybody knows he's Iron Man. So all right, when he shows up, everybody's like, "Oh, Luke's here, cool," But Leia, being who she is, she kind of could be in the background doing her thing. Now, if necessary,
her and Luke are the light side Palpatine and Vader.
Yeah.
Luke is kind of like the light side Vader role, right? He's the enforcer. He's the guy that goes out brandishing. Everybody knows him. Whereas Leia would work more kind of in the shadows, sort of like how Palpatine does.
Exactly.
And they could have done it like that. And that would have been really interesting.
Absolutely.
Of course, she would have had to live or they would have had to recast her, but that would have been a fun thing to see. But I don't know. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with this whole trailer thing. I mean, it's only going to be a week. Like I said.
Yeah, February 12th.
November 12th.
I mean, what did I say? February?
Yeah. Oh my God. 1 week. February 12th, right? Yes, November 12th, 1 week from tonight. Now, what's interesting is, I know you did, man. You were so certain about it.
Oh, man. I'm going to be loud about that for a minute.
Yeah, well, just now it's on YouTube forever, so you can watch it over and over again. But here's what's going to be so funny about this, right? Because it is a week from today. Whatever happens will very well probably be what we're going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they do drop an Obi Wan trailer of any kind, whether it's a teaser trailer or a full-blown trailer. You can bet that's going to be the topic of next week's, basically a trailer reaction, much like what we did with the Book of Boba Fett. And this is a good time to say that if you guys missed our reaction to the Book of Boba Fett trailer, which we actually reacted in real time. It wasn't one of those things that we said, okay, now let's check out the trailer and, we played it and then came back. No, we actually watched it in real time on the show live and reacted to it. And then, of course, we talked about it after. So definitely check out that video if you guys missed it. And, of course, while you're there, you might as well hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. Like button actually helps our channel to grow. It puts us in front of more people so we can hopefully get our audience a little bit bigger and talk Star Wars with more people. And then by hitting that subscribe button, you guys will know exactly when we're releasing another episode. Now, generally, of course, we go live every Friday at 8, every Monday at 8. And this Monday coming up, Visions, Episode 5. The Twins, I think is what it's called, right? Not sure.
Ronaldo. It's his second favorite episode.
So it is his second favorite episode. So we're finally going to get to this one. And, just like I did, I think I actually said this past Monday when we kind of bailed on it to do the Book of Boba Fett thing, is that I like the episode, and that's all I'm going to say about it. You gotta watch Monday in order to find out our full thoughts on it. But over the next, how many ever weeks it is, there's 9 episodes. We're on episode 5, so do the math. That's basically what we're talking about on Mondays. So with that, hopefully we see you guys Monday night at 8 o'clock. It's going to wrap up the show for tonight. Check out and see what happens next Friday because, like I said, we could be getting an Obi Wan trailer. So Ronaldo can't wait to see that review. So yeah, man, go back and check it out. All right, so with that, we're going to say goodnight. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.